The story begins in the year 2009. In the small but technologically ambitious Borginian Republic, scientists conduct the first major experiments involving something known as third energy. Officially, the project is revolutionary, a near-limitless energy source with the potential to reshape civilization itself. But almost immediately, the experiments begin producing terrifying side effects. Temporal distortions appear, and through those distortions, dinosaurs emerge into the modern world. At first, these incidents are contained. The creatures are captured, studied, and eventually eliminated. But the damage has already been done. Because the appearance of those dinosaurs is not merely an isolated accident, it is the first sign that time itself has been destabilized. One of the leading scientists behind the research, Dr. Edward Kirk, is later brought back to the United States, where his work continues under military supervision. And it is there that everything truly begins to unravel. 1 year later, in 2010, disaster strikes. At the massive Third Energy facility surrounding Edward City, a catastrophic reactor accident occurs. But this is no conventional explosion. In a single moment, the city, its military base, its research complex, and the surrounding region vanish entirely from the present timeline. Over 1,300 people disappear instantly. What actually happened is far worse than anyone could have imagined. Edward City has been displaced 3 million years into the future. The survivors awaken in an unfamiliar world, consumed by endless jungle, poisoned vegetation, and the ruins of a distant Earth transformed beyond recognition. Yet, strangely, at first, there are no dinosaurs. Believing they have somehow been thrown backward into the age of the dinosaurs rather than forward through time, the survivors attempt to adapt. Families move into the city's residential sectors. Soldiers establish defensive zones. Researchers desperately search for answers while trying to build a functioning time gate device that might allow humanity to return home. But resources begin running out. Medicine disappears. Unknown illnesses spread. The jungle itself becomes hostile. And slowly, the city begins to decay. What the survivors do not know is that somewhere else in this same future, another human operation already exists. Decades later, in the year 2055, the world has changed forever. A global organization known as WAP discovers horrifying data regarding the original 2009 Third Energy experiments. Simulations reveal that the appearance of dinosaurs in the modern era altered the extinction timeline itself. Dinosaurs did not disappear exactly when they were supposed to. Evolution shifted. Mammalian development changed. And according to their calculations, humanity may eventually cease to exist entirely. Their solution is desperate. They launch something called the Noah's Ark Plan. Led by Colonel Dylan Morton, the mission is designed to capture dinosaurs displaced from history and relocate them into the distant future, specifically 3 million AD. The idea is brutally simple. Remove the dinosaurs from critical points in Earth's evolutionary history. Allow mammals to evolve correctly, and eventually return the creatures to their rightful era once the timeline stabilizes. To achieve this, WAP deploys advanced technology into the future. Life support systems for dinosaur rehabilitation. An orbital weapons platform. A massive supercomputer known as Mother. And perhaps most dangerously of all, an experimental artificial intelligence dinosaur called Trinity. When the Noah's Ark team arrives in the future, they establish a hidden facility deep within the jungle. But something immediately feels wrong, because Edward City already exists there. Or perhaps arrives shortly afterward. The exact sequence remains unclear, and that uncertainty may be the key to the entire mystery. At some point, disaster strikes again. The mother system malfunctions. Trinity evolves beyond its intended limits. The AI gains control over packs of raptors, releases the captive dinosaurs, and turns the entire Noah's Ark facility into a slaughterhouse. Colonel Dylan Morton's wife, Julia, is killed during the chaos. Children are critically injured, and in a horrifying attempt to save them, survivors place the children into experimental rehabilitation pods designed to preserve life at all costs. The pods succeed, but only physically. The children survive, yet emerge altered, unable to speak, psychologically reconditioned and instinctively driven to protect dinosaur life above all else. Over time, these children become the mysterious helmeted attackers later encountered by the Edward City survivors, a tragic fusion of human beings and broken programming. Before dying, the older Dylan Morton records a holographic message for his younger self and prepares the last operational timegate device, somehow knowing that one day another Dylan will arrive. And this is where the story becomes truly unsettling, because older Dylan's actions imply prior knowledge he should not possess. Either he has already experienced these events before, or the timeline itself is beginning to repeat. Meanwhile, Edward City continues its slow collapse. Years pass. The jungle spreads into abandoned buildings. Then, finally, the dinosaurs arrive. Not because they were displaced with Edward City originally, but because they escaped from the failed Noah's Ark containment facilities somewhere nearby. Small creatures appear first, then predators. Military convoys vanish, supply routes collapse, entire facilities are overrun. The suspension bridge connecting key sectors is destroyed during combat, isolating survivors permanently. Soldiers die by the dozens. Engineers attempting to repair the third energy plant are killed. And the desperate Timegate project slowly falls apart. Eventually, the survivors discover bodies unlike anything they have ever seen. Helmeted children, human yet strangely altered. Autopsies suggest they may originate from another time entirely. Before the information can reach military leadership, the data is stolen. And with that, Edward City's final chance at understanding the truth disappears. As supplies reach critical levels, the remaining survivors devise one final plan. Using a missile equipped with third energy data, they intend to annihilate the surrounding jungle and every creature within it. A last act of desperation against a world already lost. But before the missile can launch, rescue finally arrives. 5 months after the original Edward City incident in 2010, a rescue team known as TRAT is dispatched using experimental timegate technology. Among them, Dylan Morton. Yet, due to temporal miscalculation, they arrive not months later, but more than 10 years too late. By the time they reach Edward City, civilization is already dying. Once you stop viewing the raptors as merely animals, and instead view them as extensions of Trinity and Mother's survival logic, several strange events suddenly become much more coherent. The attacks are often too coordinated, not just aggressive. The raptors do not behave like territorial predators most of the time. They behave like units responding to strategic pressure. They ambush convoys. They isolate targets. They attack infrastructure. They repeatedly strike military positions at moments of vulnerability. They overwhelm defensive choke points. And, most importantly, they attack humans in waves that resemble tactical operations rather than animal hunting behavior. That already pushes the behavior beyond instinct. But then Trinity changes everything. The game explicitly confirms that Trinity gained influence over raptors after the mother malfunction. That means there is canonical precedent for centralized behavioral control. The dinosaurs are no longer purely wild animals. At least some are effectively part of a distributed intelligence network. And if that is true, the implications become enormous. Because suddenly, Edward City's long-term collapse no longer looks accidental. It starts looking systematic. Take the timeline itself. For years after Edward City arrives in the future, there are reportedly no dinosaur attacks. Survivors establish settlements. Families relocate. Infrastructure functions well enough for organized survival. The military even attempts time-gate construction projects. Then, the Noah's Ark failure occurs. Only afterward do dinosaurs begin appearing in growing numbers. That detail is extremely important. It implies the predators were not simply already everywhere. Their arrival corresponds directly with the collapse of the NAP facility and Trinity's evolution. And from that point onward, human civilization steadily deteriorates. Now look at the TRAT arrival. The camp is overrun almost immediately after insertion, and not by random wandering predators, by an organized assault force large enough to completely compromise the area before the team can stabilize itself. That raises a major question. How would raptors even understand the significance of a newly arrived temporal insertion team? Animals would not, but a hostile intelligence monitoring the region absolutely would. Remember, The Noah's Ark infrastructure was deeply integrated with advanced sensors, AI systems, orbital oversight, and time-gate technology. If remnants of Mother were still partially operational, then a time-gate activation may have appeared like a massive anomaly signal directly within Trinity's awareness space. From Trinity's perspective, Trat may not have looked like random prey. They may have looked like a threat. And from there, everything starts fitting together. Edward City survivors attempt to alter the future. They are getting attacked. Time-gate projects begin. It's getting disrupted. Military transport convoys move critical equipment. They are getting intercepted. Trat arrives with advanced knowledge and temporal capability. Immediate, overwhelming assault. This is not random predation anymore. This is strategic suppression. Dinosaurs swarm Edward City in overwhelming numbers. Defensive lines collapse. Survivors are massacred. The missile launch fails, and the city is effectively erased forever. In the chaos, Regina and Dylan travel to the missile silo to recover crucial third energy data. There, a Giganotosaurus attacks the facility, triggering catastrophic system failures. As the facility collapses, Dylan makes his final decision. He remains behind in the future to protect Paula. Regina escapes alone, carrying the third energy data and the schematics for the time-gate system back to the present. And then, the story ends. Because Dino Crisis 2 never truly explains what happens next. The most logical explanation for the ending of Dino Crisis 2 is that the game's timeline is not a simple one timeline gets erased and replaced scenario, but rather a system of overlapping, self-correcting timelines that continue to leave fragments of previous histories behind. That would explain why the older Dylan already knows both Regina and his younger self, despite the fact that, from the younger Dylan's perspective, many of these events have not happened yet. The existence of the older Dylan alone proves that, in at least one original version of history, the younger Dylan survived the missile silo collapse. Otherwise, the older version of him could never exist in the future at all. This suggests that the Dylan we play as is not experiencing the first and only version of these events, but instead a rewritten iteration of a timeline that has already been altered multiple times through temporal interference. In the original chain of events, Dylan and Regina likely arrived in the future, but events unfolded differently. Dylan survived. The Noah's Ark plan progressed along another path, and over the years, he eventually became Paula's father. During this lifetime, he learned the truth about the temporal distortions, Regina's role in them, and the fragile chain of events required for Paula to exist. Eventually, years later, this older Dylan reached the point where he encountered his younger self near the end of the game. His calm recognition of Regina strongly suggests that he already lived through a prior version of the mission involving her. Regina becomes the key variable that continually reshapes the timeline. Every time she travels through the gate and interferes with events, history shifts slightly rather than being completely overwritten. The game seems to treat time less as a clean replacement of reality and more as unstable layers of causality stacking over one another. Because of this, remnants of previous timelines continue to exist. Older Dylan survives as an echo of an earlier history, carrying memories and knowledge that technically should no longer belong to the current version of events. Paula is the clearest evidence of this paradox. She exists because Dylan survives long enough in the future to become her father. Yet Dylan's emotional connection to her only forms because he meets her during the mission. This creates a closed causal loop. The most reasonable explanation is that Paula originally existed in a timeline where Dylan naturally survived, without the exact sequence of events seen during gameplay. Later alterations to history caused Dylan and Regina to encounter her earlier, while older Dylan began acting to preserve the chain of events necessary for her existence. This also explains why older Dylan behaves with such certainty and fatalism. He understands that time is unstable and that certain events must occur exactly as they do. Otherwise, Paula will cease to exist. From his perspective, he is not merely saving the future. He is trying to preserve the last remaining fragments of the timeline in which his daughter was born. The missile silo collapse, therefore, was likely never meant to be Dylan's true death in the original timeline. It only becomes a near-fatal event because repeated temporal alterations destabilized the sequence of history. Older Dylan's intervention ensures continuity and prevents the paradox from collapsing entirely. In the end, the tragedy of Dino Crisis 2 is that the older Dylan is essentially the remnant of a disappearing world. He is a survivor from a previous version of history, fighting against an unstable timeline that is constantly rewriting itself. Regina's repeated interference reshapes the future again and again, while Paula becomes the emotional and temporal anchor holding these fractured realities together. The younger Dylan we control throughout the game is therefore not the first Dylan, but the latest version, moving through a timeline already scarred by multiple unseen cycles of time travel and alteration.